Welcome back. Background is different. Currently, like, redoing my room a little bit. But I know I said I was going to be posting true crime videos every Monday, but I've just been exhausted from work, so I'm going to post just one before Monday if I can, because my internet is shocking. So for today's case, we're going to be talking about Mary Boyle, who is the longest and youngest missing person in Irish history. She's kind of dubbed like the Irish Madeleine McCann just because of how young she was when she disappeared. So Mary Boyle was born on June 14th, 1977 in Sparkhill, Birmingham, to her mother Anne Boyle and her father Charlie Boyle. Now, she did have an older brother called Paddy, and she also had a twin sister called Anne. I believe, because this case, like, there's not a lot of information about it out there, but I do believe that they did move back to Ireland when Mary was pretty young. I know she was only 6 when she disappeared, but they did move back shortly after having both Mary and Anne. So they moved back to Ireland, and then a couple of days leading up to Paddy's Day of 1977, they travelled up to Cashellard in Ballyshannon, near County Donegal, to Anne, so our Mary's mother's parents' house, for a couple of days. So they were up there for St. Patrick's Day because they were attending an anniversary mass for an uncle. Everything seemed to be fine, and then we moved to the 18th of March 1977. So as of right now, Mary has been missing for 48 years. She was last seen, and this also might be a short video as well because, like I said, there wasn't a lot of information, but she was last seen at 3:30 p.m. outside of her grandparents' house because they had just, from what I've read in articles, they had just had dinner, and like all the adults were inside cleaning up and all the children were outside playing. And her uncle, who I kind of have my suspicions about him, and I'll explain. So her uncle was returning a ladder to a nearby neighbour's house, which was apparently only a 5-minute walk from the Gallaghers, because I believe Anne's maiden name was Gallagher, from the Gallaghers farm. And Mary decided to follow him, and they were walking down the road, and there was like a patch of water that Mary just could not get over herself, and nobody knows if she went back to the grandparents' house herself, or else if the uncle, who I believe was called Noel Gallagher, but I will fact check that, told her to go back. But she ended up apparently going back, according to the uncle. And the uncle, when he reached the neighbour's house, the ones that he was returning the ladder to, he stayed there for 30 minutes to have a chat. Now, when Anne, the mother, noticed that Mary was missing, and this is why I kind of feel like the uncle's a bit on the dodgy sort of side, because when Anne, the mother, discovered that her daughter was missing, she was going around asking everyone in the family, did anybody see Mary? And he didn't immediately jump up and be like, yeah, she came with me on the walk to like the neighbour's house, but either like I said, because no one knows if she turned back on herself or if the uncle told her to turn back, but she went back. Like, it took him, I think, a good like hour or so to be like, yeah, she was with me, like I was the last person to see her. But they didn't report her missing for 2 hours after they like discovered that she was missing in the first place. Now, like, the family did obviously go around the local area and like question did anybody see her, and a local fisherman claimed that he had seen Mary be put into a red car, and the car drove off pretty quickly. But years later, the fisherman appeared on a BBC podcast and said that he actually did not in fact see Mary be put into a red car, but he did see a red suspicious looking car around the area. And many of the bogs, because if you know anything about rural Ireland, especially up by Donegal, there's so many bogs, there's so much like land, like farmland in general. Many of the bogs were drained in effort to find Mary, and her twin sister Anne had said that when Mary was following the uncle, she was eating a packet of crisps, and she thought that if she had fallen into any sort of, you know, water and potentially would have drowned, that the packet of crisps would have surfaced to the top, which I think is pretty interesting. And I think like this case, like I only recently, maybe in the last 2-3 years, have heard of this case, and I know I've done this before, but different sort of styles of videos, I'm just kind of redoing it. But I have not heard about this case really only in the last 2-3 years, because before I went to childcare, I went to college in Donegal, and one of my friends were telling me about it, because we were talking about true crime cases, and she mentioned Mary Boyle, and I had no idea who she was until I looked up, because there's a documentary on YouTube if you're interested. I think it's over an hour long, called Mary Boyle, The Untold Story. I feel like that documentary is really good. Like, it gives like an insight, sort of clear depth of everything that's going on, like past like sergeants come and talk about it, and her twin sister Anne talks about it. So I do recommend the documentary if you're interested. So the guards started their search in the surrounding areas. They like drained the bog and like any water from behind the grandparents' house, and they kind of did like a film reconstruction of where Mary's twin sister Anne filling in for her sister's space on how long and it would take her to get from where she turned back when she was with her uncle to the grandparents' house. Now, one of the most kind of famous people that are kind of really advocating for this case is an Irish country singer. She's quite big here, Margot, and she's also in that documentary. She has spent so much money over the years, because she is from Donegal. She has funded so many search efforts into try and find Mary Boyle. Like, she's even been in contact with the twin sister Anne, and they have went, you know, to the government together to try and, you know, get something to be done. And she also claimed in this documentary, I remember she was talking about how she was down, there was like a holiday sort of place, her and her family was down, and she had seen Mary and Anne when she was there. Like, so she seen Mary Boyle, this was obviously before she disappeared, with her own eyes. So the police did do like a search or guards, because we call them guards here, in 1977 when she did disappear, and the latest one I believe was in 2016, so nearly 10 years ago. And absolutely none has been found, but they say that there is currently a new investigation within her case. And Mary's case, and this also was kind of talked about in the documentary, it did spark a lot of public interest at potential politics, all that sort of stuff was involved in the case. Apparently there was like a high up politician back in Donegal when Mary first disappeared that, and this has never been confirmed if this actually happened or the alleged politician has never been named, but a high up politician demanded to the guards to let the main suspect of the disappearance of Mary to be let go. Which, if that is true, that is strange. Because apparently the politician had phoned up the guards and was like, "Yeah, you're not allowed to question him." So the guards let him go, which I mean, like, it's strange for the politician to behave like that, but also to the guards, why did they listen to a politician? Like, I feel like if that did happen, the politician would have had to like pay off the guards to not question their main suspect, which I don't know. But apparently Margot had went up to this said politician and had asked him outright, "Did you make the call to the guards to tell the guards not to question the main suspect?" And he pretty much denied it and called Margot a liar, which I don't know, like, there has never been like, I don't think there's ever been like a named sort of suspect. I feel like with, you know, true crimes nowadays, whether it's a murder case or a disappearing case, whether it's solved or unsolved, I feel like there always is like a main sort of suspect on who people did commit the crime. Like, for example, in the John May Ramsey case, a lot of people think the family was involved. In Madeleine McCann, a lot of people think that the parents had some sort of involvement. Whereas in this case, nobody knows. I mean, I have heard one sort of theory, which I will get into at the end, that I feel like maybe, I mean, I honestly have no idea if it could be true. So, like I said, this case has remained unsolved for 48 years, and she is the longest and youngest missing person from Ireland, and people do dub her as the Irish Madeleine McCann, which, well, maybe I'll research Madeleine McCann in depth, because will we ever find out? Because I feel like there's always updates on what's happening, but is it actually true? Like, has anyone come out and said anything? I do not know. It has never been reported in the Dáil, which, if you're not from Ireland, the Dáil is pretty much our government. And there's been a lot of stuff debated in the last couple of months over in our Dáil, but Mary Boyle's case has never been mentioned in the Dáil, and an MP raised this to the European Parliament, where she kind of criticised the lack of investigation and the lack of resources, because they seem to be very, I feel like, lackadaisy with her case. Like, I feel like they're not really in a massive push to find out what happened to her or who took her, if potentially she was kidnapped. So in 2018, the Boyle family had like a peaceful sort of protest at the coroner's office in Strandalore. I hope I am pronouncing that correctly. So the whole purpose of this protest was to kind of pressure the coroner to do an inquest in Mary's death, because I believe that because she's been missing for so long that she's now been legally declared dead, and to which would allow for the key suspect, because I don't actually know if the key suspect has ever been named. There's been a few suspects named, but I'm pretty sure they've been cleared, but I don't believe that the key suspect in her disappearance has actually been named. But the family kind of hoped that if they pushed the coroner's office in an inquest in Mary's death, that would allow the key suspect involved in her disappearance be investigated. And Anne, Mary's twin sister, was kind of the leader of this little protest, and she handed in a petition containing 10,000 signatures for this to happen. And I don't believe this ever happened. And then in March 2018, the guards issued a request for information regarding the case and stated that the investigation was still alive. Now, as of 2025, I could not, like, the latest things I could find was in 2018, which was 7 years ago. So then in 2016, Gemma O'Doherty made the documentary that I was telling you about, that's not available on YouTube. It's called Mary Boyle, The Untold Story, and there was several possibilities of how she was disappeared, what happened to her, if she's alive, if she's unfortunately dead, in the documentary. And this was kind of the, I guess, I don't know, the narrative that they were trying to go for. But in the documentary, Mary's twin sister Anne believed that Mary was getting sexually abused, and if I can remember correctly, I think in the documentary it was kind of implied that it was maybe by the uncle that was doing the abusing towards her. And you know, I feel like you kind of hear this, that in order for the victim to be silent, they are killed. And that's what Anne Boyle, Mary's twin sister, believes. I feel like anytime I'm saying Anne, I have to say if it's Mary's mother or her sister. The documentary did come under a lot of criticism because a lot of people just didn't like the idea, because a lot of retired sergeants came out and denied the whole, like in the documentary I believe, that there was any sort of political involvement within the investigation of Mary. And one of the officers said that, like, he was told to ease off in investigation, like in questioning a suspect, but it wasn't by a politician, it was by another police officer or guard that was present in the interrogating room with him whilst he was questioning the suspect. Now, don't know if this was apparently the lead suspect or if it was the couple of suspects that they had in the guard station over the course of time. So the kind of outcome of, like, in all the criticism for the documentary, Gemma O'Doherty was sued by Fianna Fáil's politicians, I think he was called Sean McKeith, for €75,000. Although I believe in the documentary he was never named, like he was never mentioned by name. But in 2019 he did pass, and a judge granted his estate leave to continue this case, which I really don't know what that means. But the initial suspect was questioned after Mary's disappearance, but was released without any sort of charges. And it was kind of the same for any other suspects that were questioned in relation to Mary's disappearance. So Brian McMillan was taken in for questioning in October of 2014, but was released without charge the following day. He later went on public record denying any involvement in his disappearance and stating that the local people knew he could not have been involved. Which is like, okay, like, I mean, if you were involved, I feel like you would be able to find someone to lie for you that you were not involved. And then this was kind of like one of the most named sort of suspects, Robert Black, who was a Scottish serial killer of children, who also was a truck driver in County Donegal and was seen parked outside a pub, I believe, that was in the area in around the time of Mary's disappearance. A witness also later came out and claimed that they had heard crying and whimpering in the back of his van. But people say that by the time that the Gemma O'Doherty documentary came out, a lot of people believed that he apparently could not be responsible for Mary's disappearance, which I don't understand, because there had because I don't know if he's ever been cleared as a suspect. Because if he was a serial killer, first of all, if you're a serial killer, like you kind of appear dodgy, but especially if you're a serial killer of children and your van was seen in the area when a missing child disappears, to me, that's the number one sort of suspect. Like, that screams potential suspect to me. So Anne and several other relatives of the Boyle family claim that they know what happened to the girl and who is responsible for her disappearance. Now, we're kind of coming to the end of this because, like I said, there's not a lot of information out there, but this did cause a kind of split in the family. And Anne, the mother, and Anne, the daughter, really do not get along. I believe the mother, Anne, is still alive. The mother publicly admonished her daughter in 2016, calling public appeals, and I quote, "the most ridiculous carry-on I've ever seen in my life." And I don't understand this, because if you research anything, or even if you watch the documentary, Anne, Mary's twin sister, seemed to be really vocal about finding answers about her sister's disappearance. So it's like, I don't understand why the mother is kind of behaving like that, considering her daughter is trying to find out what happened to her other daughter. But it makes no sense. But Charlie Boyle, Mary's father, died in a fishing accident off the coast of Donegal in 2005. And like I said, I believe Anne, the mother, is still alive. And Margot, the country singer, released a single called "The Missing Mary Boyle" to release funds for new search. And because of Anne's public accusations, you know what I'm trying to say, the family still remains divided, and there's not a lot to go off. I feel like the documentary really kind of puts a lot of things out there, but in the sense of online, like on Google, there's not a lot of information out there about Mary and her disappearance, or even her early life, because I really tried to research her early life before she went missing, and it was nearly impossible to find anything. I definitely do think that Jerry Gallagher, I believe that was the uncle's name, was a bit kind of odd that he didn't say straight away when Anne, the mother, said that, has anyone seen Mary, that she's disappeared, that he didn't say anything that he was potentially the last person to see Mary before she disappeared. I definitely think it's weird. Do I have any sort of thoughts about what happened, if she's dead, if she's still out there? I have no idea, because like you've seen the most miracle things happen in missing person cases where people will be missing for decades and they're found. And I don't actually know if she's dead, because they have drained so much of the bog life in the surrounding areas over the decades that I'm kind of thinking, when they have found her, if that was the potential case. I'm not sure, but yeah, let me know what you think. And if you watched the documentary, it's actually called Mary Boyle, The Untold Story. Let me know what you think, and if you have any other information, let me know. I'm sorry this is a shorter sort of video. It's just that I genuinely could not find anything really online. And yeah, I will see you in my next video.